Welcome to Heart-Based Medicine's Heart of Healthcare podcast, featuring John Dupuy, the co-founder and CEO of iAwake Technologies.
Today we have a very special guest, John Dupuy. John holds a master's degree in Transpersonal Psychology, and he is the co-founder and CEO of iAwake Technology, a company that is developing and promoting brainwave entrainment technologies for many years. During our conversation today, we're exploring how the diagnostic process, as we have learned it, may be not so helpful in the process of really giving the best to the patients that we're caring for. And we're exploring how over time we have learned to trust and integrate intuition in the diagnostic and therapeutic process, and how this is something that we haven't learned during our training period. We're also looking at how brain entrainment technology might help us in situations where increased resilience and heart openness are most conducive to supporting the healing process of our patients and actually to take care of ourselves as therapists and physicians. Let's welcome John Dupuy. Welcome, John. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time today.
You bet. My pleasure.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. We've been working hard and working out hard. You know, I wake up in the morning and I do my meditation, and then I go to the gym and I do about 35 minutes of cardio on treadmill, and then I do about 20 minutes of strength training, and then I went out and practiced tennis, my serve, forehand and backhand, and did some more meditation. I took my dog on a run, and this is all before like 7:30 in the morning, and then I get to work.
Wow, this is how you set the tone for the day.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, and yes, it's got to be. I mean, you know, I there's certain practices that I do that if I don't do well, you know, and I've had issues with depression, for example, in my life, and the exercise and the meditation, and of course I use the iAwake meditation tools. I'm the CEO of the company, and we create these audio tracks that entrain the brain to to whatever brainwave states are desired. You know, alpha, beta, theta, delta, epsilon, gamma, lambda, you know, so anyway, we mix those. And so we have these great tools that make meditation more effective, and you get extraordinary results in much less time than if you were doing a traditional meditation type of practice, because most of us can't stick with it unless we're, you know, extremely disciplined, or we live in an ashram, or we have a community or something like that. And then it takes many years usually to develop the necessary skills to where it really starts to become very powerfully transformative. And most people will not stick with it that long because it seems like a waste of time when you just try to sit down and start meditating and you watch your mind and it's miserable. And so they don't stick with it. With the tools that I've used, really helps. And it's been a great aid in my overcoming depression and anyway, finding what I'm supposed to be doing with my life and creativity. And anyway, a whole, I don't even know what we're supposed to talk about, Jan, so I'll turn it over to you. What would you like to speak about?
Well, you're already in the midst of it, so thank you. Great. What you're sharing, I mean, you're, as the CEO of iAwake, you're talking of brain entrainment as if it was the most natural thing on the planet. But many people don't know about brain entrainment, and many people don't know about the options to help ourselves and support ourselves by using the kind of technology that you're developing.
Yeah.
So maybe you can tell us and what difference it makes for you to start with. You're talking about your own daily practices.
Yeah.
Why would you use, or when would you use the magic audio files that you're creating?
Well, yeah. It started out. I was years ago. I worked in the therapeutic wilderness industry, so we would take people out into the southern Utah wilderness, which is huge, incredibly beautiful mountains and red rock deserts, and there's a lot of public land in southern Utah, which means it belongs to the government, which means it belongs to everybody basically, and it's not like private property everywhere. And you can wander for miles and miles and hundreds of miles and just be alone. So we developed programs for it. Started with adolescents, teenagers who were having problems largely with drugs, and then I started a program called Passages to Recovery. We're dealing with 18-year-olds and over who were having drug issues. And so I knew, and I've been quite experienced in working with addicts, and I knew about the 12 steps, and which, bless them, they're really useful and good, and it helped a lot of people, but probably not enough, and there's a lot of things that are left out, like the brain, for example, and the physical body, and the basis of addiction. So I started trying to put together a more holistic approach to treating addiction, and I knew that meditation was a serious part of it. In fact, it's in 12 steps. Step 11, it says, through prayer and meditations, sought to increase our conscious contact with God, seeking only his will and the power to carry it out. Awesome. But most people in 12 steps don't know how to meditate or do interior transformative prayer or any of that stuff. And so I started looking for ways I try to get my beloved addicts to meditate, and everyone's going, I don't think it was doing much. Is it over yet? And so then I discovered these tools, brain entrainment. I think it was a conversation with Ken Wilber and Bill Harris, who started Centerpoint. And I was listening to it, and I go, wow, that's really amazing. What if that would be the tool? I was thinking about helping other people, right, to help my addicts, recover and have a powerful transformative practice. And so finally I ordered it, and I started, using it so I'd have some experience before I gave it to my students. And I had an incredibly powerful spiritual experience, a non-dual experience, like bam, right off the bat. And I'm like, wow. I'm like enlightened. It took about 2 days. That's pretty cool. And I wouldn't say, I was enlightened, but I had a very big opening, and it lasted for a long time. It was one of these state experiences, it lights up the universe, but then, eventually goes away. But it was a very powerful way for me to start with this. And then I'd suffered from very severe depression off and on for years. And my older brother had committed suicide in my house. And he was very depressed. And of course, losing a loved one like that set me on my own path of deep depression and also suicidal thoughts. And I wanted to kill myself, but my brother had already done it, and I could not do that to my children, my family, my parents. Another son lost to suicide. Nope, not going to do it. But God, if you want to kill me, I would appreciate it, because this life is just too painful to live. So I had this experience using brain entrainment technology, which basically the basic technology is pretty simple. It's more complex, but the basic simple thing, they found out back in the 70s that if you have one beat in this ear with stereo headphones and one in this ear, say 100 and 110, that the brain didn't know how to deal with the discrepancy, and it splits the difference, and you can train the brain to 5 hertz, the difference between 100 splitting that difference. And so then you can, by working with that, you can train the brain to whatever brain state you want. And some years before that, they began to study the brains of swamis and gurus and long-term meditators, nuns, and people that engage in this kind of spiritual practice. And they found out by doing their practices, they actually would change their brainwave states. And before that, Western medicine kind of poo-pooed meditation and thought it was just some kind of archaic religious mumbo jumbo, didn't really do anything. Maybe a little self-hypnosis, whatever. But they found out these people could do this, and they never knew that people could control their brainwave states. This was a revelation to Western medicine. And of course, when you do this, really positive things happen. Joy and creativity and connection, and there's just a myriad of positive things that happen. So I got really excited about it, and I started teaching my students how to use this technology, and just promoting it with no sense of ever making any money from it. It's just like telling, hey, go buy it there, blah, blah, blah. And then some years later, I met a gentleman who was creating these tracks, and he'd heard of my interest in promotion, and he had also suffered from a lot of depression. So we started talking, and he gave me some of the stuff he was doing, and I listened to it, and I said, wow, this is a lot better than anything that I've ever used before. And I've used some really good stuff. And so that kind of became the beginning of iAwake. And of course, I've continued to use the technology on a daily basis, and pretty much for about 12 years now, at least 12 years. But it's not enough. You still have to exercise, and you still have to read the great books and talk to intelligent people, and you still have to, you have to do your emotional work and your shadow work, which the technology helps a lot, and to have a spiritual practice, and not a dogmatic, you've got to, buy into this set of beliefs, A, B, C, D, the Apostles' Creed, or whatever your particular version of, but actual interior experience of your own deepest self. And then when you have that experience, peak experience, Maslow called it, or however you want to, it is a spiritual experience, a non-dual. People have characterized it where you find that, you are connected to everything, and you are everything, and this ultimate identity is something that was never born and will never die, and it's not even in time. Time emerges from the big self. Anyway, it's all pretty esoteric, but this is the kind of stuff that begins to happen, and that just kind of shifts your relationship to everything, especially to yourself, to life, what you're doing, and you also at a level two there, you begin to cultivate an experience with the wisdom voice, where it's not your linear analytical mind, which is a wonderful thing, by the way. I'm not anti-intellectual at all. It's just not the place that wisdom emerges from. And so it's kind of that, well, I call it the soul, which is kind of where your individuality kind of meshes with divinity or with the all, and it's just a different type of understanding. And that is kind of where you get your sense of why you're here, what you're as an individual, even though you are connected to everything and you're part of all this, but you are incarnated as a human being. What are you here to do? And it's important to find that out, because if we don't, then as individuals, we're not happy. We haven't found our purpose, our path. We become cynical, depressed, angry, despair, and hopelessness. So anyway, that's what the practice does. And why do you meditate so much? Well, I was so screwed up. Maybe a lot of people aren't that screwed up and don't need to do as much practice as I have, but it's important for me, essential.
Wow, John, thank you. Thank you for sharing so much of your story and your deep exploration into this. I believe what you're telling about yourself is very relevant to many healthcare providers, certainly for physicians. I believe it was a conference this year, a large medical conference this year, that highlighted again that among the profession of physicians has the highest rate of suicide compared to any other profession.
Wow.
And so I think what the experience that you're sharing from your personal life is probably something that is not too uncommon to a probably larger number of healthcare providers than we know, as there is quite a bit of stigmatization. As a doctor, you have to be healthy and fit and healthy, and everything has to be, so you have to be strong and all the good things. While many physicians actually feel not so strong, suffer from depressions, and suicide is a big topic. And it's one that isn't really discussed very openly. It is one that is attached with fear, with shame, So I believe your story is very relevant to healthcare providers. So your experience and the help that you got from binaural audio tracks, from brain entrainment tracks, I think is very relevant. And I wonder if you would be willing to share what this actually did to you. So you knew about meditation, you were at a stage of depression, you had suicidal thoughts, and you knew about meditation already, but then this new element came in. Could you help us? Could you help me understand, and maybe others in the community understand, and how this actually helped you?
Yeah, well, let me say a little bit about suicide. And if you've never been suicidally depressed or wanting to commit suicide, it's hard to understand. I was like, what? You kill yourself? And then you lose someone or somebody famous that, really influenced your life or something, an artist or a writer or something, and they just off themselves. And it's like, how could they do that? Well, the answer is that existence, the suffering can become so great and so overwhelming that the fear of non-existence is not a fear. You would much prefer, if I could just turn this all off and there would be nothing but blackness and nothingness, that would be so preferable, infinitely preferable to the hell that I'm in. Okay. And that's just a crushing depth of pain. And so, so I was there. And of course, I felt very responsible to the people I loved. And so I had connections to the outside world. Otherwise, I'm sure I would have said to hell with it, and just cashed my chips in. But so I kept trying, and I kept going, and it would go in periods, So one of the things the president needs to know: this doesn't last forever. It seems like you're in hell and it's going to be eternal, but this too will pass. So it's like when you're flying and you're in a cloud. You go, oh my God, I'll never see again. We're in a cloud. No, eventually you come out. Okay, you can see again. So you go through these periods. And I would, throw myself into trying to do good while I was healthy enough and start programs and work with people in the wilderness. And then I would have periods of deep depression where I couldn't do anything. It's not like, can I get up and go to work? It's like, can I get up and take a shower? It's incredibly painful and debilitating. So I started using this, and I was trained as a therapist, and I'd studied transpersonal psychology, which is the psychology that includes spirituality as an essential part of being human. Mm-hmm. So I think all medical people need to realize that, okay, that there are other parts. I mean, what Western medicine does is done magnificently, okay, but it's left out things. And that's the problem, and I know you're familiar with Ken Wilber, and I'm familiar with Ken, and I count him, actually, he's a personal friend at this point in my life. And I just love the man, and he's given us so much, but he has this idea of 4 quadrants. Okay. Yeah. And the upper right quadrant, we'll apply this to human beings for the sake of this conversation. You apply it to anything, a hamster or, an organization. But anyway, the upper right is the physical human body. Okay. And Western medicine in many instances has done magnificent things to help heal the human body. I read someplace that antibiotics, and they get a lot of bad press, antibiotics, let's not do that. Well, that they say in the West, in the first world countries, if you will, that antibiotics has given each of us on average 30 more years to live than we would have had otherwise. Are you kidding me? That's a lot, so, I mean, we need to really respect any field of study that has brought us those kinds of, I'm 62. I still have my teeth. In fact, I had a massive heart attack last March. It's about a month from now, it'd be my year anniversary. And if I hadn't been near a cardio center, I wouldn't be having this conversation. They had to go in and open a valve that completely collapsed. And so I was dying, and they thought I was going to die. It was pretty bad, 100% collapse. And then when they opened it, it's like I was just kind of flooded with this. The pain went away, and it's just like, okay. And I looked up to the doctor and said, thank you. You just saved my life. And you're like, oh, no. And I said, no, you really did. Thank you so much. And, and when I was there in the hospital, I thanked them all and the team. I said, without you guys, I would not have this other chance to be alive. So then amazing thing. So anyway, the physical body. And then the upper left, now this is where the medical science has fallen down on the job, or maybe hasn't included it, is the interior life. That's the, your feelings, your love, your spiritual experiences, your deep atheism, your resentments, your traumas, your triumphs, your beliefs, all the stuff, right? Your loves, all the stuff that makes up the interior of the human being. Now some scientists, B.F. Skinner tried to reduce everything, that it's just a brain, it's just stimulus and blah, blah, blah. But any of us who actually have spent any time in our interiors know that's bunk. But the two things can inform each other. In other words, I could look at your brain while you're in love with your wife or whoever you're in love with, and you're experiencing being in love, and we can hook up your brain to all these different brain scans and all this stuff, and say, wow, you're producing certain types of chemicals. This part of your brain's firing up. This part, da da da. I said, this is the picture of what a brain in love looks like. There's commonalities throughout the human species, maybe with chimps too. I don't know, dogs probably. And but that doesn't tell you diddly squat about what the interior experience of being in love is. Do that, you either have to be in love, or you listen to Beatles songs, or you listen to, the sonnets of Shakespeare, or Rumi, or whoever. Get that experience. And so if you just have the one without the other, you're incredibly less informed than you should be. So I think that if medicine would simply begin to bring the interiors in to the total health of a human being, just that would be, like, how are you doing? How do you feel? Are you happy? Do you feel you have a purpose in your life, instead of just, okay, take the shot, see you next week, and check the blood pressure and do all that stuff. That's all essential stuff, very good, but you have to deal with the other stuff. And I don't think medicine has really brought that together yet. And there were probably historical reasons for that they kind of had to get away from the religious and this and that and the superstitious or whatever it was, and just focus on the objective physical. And they made great progress. But at a certain point in our evolution, we have to go back, and which brings us, Jan, to your work. How do we bring the interior and the love and the compassion and the highest human values back into the field of healing people? I mean, it seems like an obvious thing, right? But not so much.
Well, I couldn't, you're right. I couldn't agree more. And certainly this is not what I learned during medical school. This is certainly what has been drummed out of me during medical school and training, is that this is not objective. This is not scientific. This is your emotional business, and kind of steer clear of all of this. So the actual, if you like, the therapeutic alliance, the patient doctor or patient healthcare provider connection is so important. So when I listened to your story when you were when you were in hospital with heart attack, and they opened your coronary artery stenosis, and you could almost feel the flow happening again, and you were so grateful, and that gratitude apparently was not really resonated, right? So you were almost alone with your gratitude for the people working for you. Which is also it's very symptomatic. It's not very common to actually take credit for the work that we're doing. While it would be such a nourishing moment when you're working for 40 hours, 80 hours, 120 hours a week, whatever it is in your specific setting, any kind of crazy number, and you're giving your best, and you're giving your heart, and you're giving everything, and we're kind of told to be totally objective and not personally involved. So if somebody says thank you, it's almost like
they really taught you that.
Yeah, thank you who,
So you were taught to be objective, and were you taught the importance of an emotional connection with your patients, and that should be fostered?
No, I was taught about patterns of signs and symptoms. I was taught in pattern recognition, in understanding the healthy body and the sick body. And I was taught when I talk to you and listen to your story, I'm going to listen through my filter of knowledge and try and get the diagnosis right. And as soon as I feel comfortable that your pattern of signs and symptoms meets my pattern of my case definition of a certain diagnosis, then I know what you have or what you're missing. And then I know what to do according to some algorithm that is established by the experts in the field. But it leaves me out as a person, and it also leaves you out as a person.
And
So
it also you
yeah.
out of trusting your intuitive wisdom. Like sometimes I'm sure you're with a patient and you just know, and of course you have to go back and then check it out with all the knowledge and all the science and all the bullet points and see if that's really it. But sometimes you just know, you'll know something. And I worked as a counselor and a therapist for years, and sometimes you just, bam, and
Totally.
I got this image of da-da-da-da-da, and they said, that's my dream last night. That's exactly it. And that opens up this whole huge, doorway into very powerful material that's very healing and extremely, but you have to have both. And, it's like the benefits and the goodness of Western medicine are so apparent, obviously, or they should be. Yeah. We should appreciate it, and we should respect doctors. They should be persons of great respect. However, just bringing on, Jan, what your life work is about is bringing the heart back and the humanity back into the healing field could just make it so immensely more effective and something that you'd like to go to your doctor instead of dreading it, right?
Yeah. So as a resident, when I was a resident, when I had moments like this, I would push them aside. It's like, oh, this is just, I don't know where this is coming from, but this is not protocol. And this, I can't understand this rationally. So therefore it's not real. And now being into this, for 20 years, caring for kids for 20 years and talking to those that, do this even longer, the more senior people become, the more they allow these moments to actually happen. And it's to the great despair of the residents because they feel like, oh, well, what is the consultant or what is the attending doing again? They're not following protocol, and why are they deviating? And they're totally confused. Understandably so, and so was I.
So I mean, we need to get, for example, meditation would be a wonderful thing to bring into the training of young doctors. Why do you have to wait 20, 30, 40 years down the road to learn what you should have learned, from day one? And cultivating yourself and the way they train physicians in the United States is like you get thrown into these hospitals and you're on for 24 hours, 48 hours without sleep. And this is supposed to make you a better healer. It's harassment. I mean, I don't understand how that. I don't want a buzzed out intern who's taking speed to stay awake, making life and death decisions about anybody I care about, including myself. I mean, it's just crazy, and I don't know why that is, but it's just a tradition or something.
So, John, you were touching on two things I'd like to get back. One is you were saying that let's consider what would be a kind of practice that we could introduce earlier in the training of healthcare professionals, and the other piece that you touched on was that you have moments of intuition as a counselor where you just know, and it's not protocol, it's not something you learned, it's just something that becomes clear as part of the interaction with your client. Maybe let's start with this one. Do you have an example? Do you have a story that you could share? Like, is there a moment with a client that you can remember where this moment of insight was there and it?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's crazy. When I was suffering through one of my periods of depression before I discovered this kind of meditation, I had a girlfriend who was a Reiki master. A person could, with energy, subtle energy, could do powerful things. And she said, "You need to do this. It's as a self-help tool." And I was like, whatever. And I was very depressed. And I actually went to, it was in Northern California, and I went to this Reiki center, and they had freebie night, and they had 3 people doing this on me at one time. It was just like, oh my God, I got such a beautiful sense of love, and just something shifted in me, and I thought that I'd been abandoned by God, that God wanted me dead and everything. And I just felt this tremendous love. And it's like, wow, I'm not abandoned. It was a beautiful thing. So I was kind of like she just got me through all these initiations, and I still don't understand all this stuff is about. But occasionally I would do that and lay hands on people, and really remarkable things would happen. And I was talking to a friend of mine. Well, as you know, because I've had a heart attack, you have to, there's supplements and diet and exercise and all these things that you need to do. And I was talking to her about it, and she reminded me of something that happened, it must have been 20 years ago or more. She had been visiting us at our house in southern Utah, and her dog, her beloved dog, was running around, and one of the neighbor's kids shot him with like a pellet gun, and it pierced his pancreas, and he was dying. And I went out, and I don't know what possessed me. I do this occasionally. I said, well, maybe I can help. And I just put my hands on the wound, and the dog came back, and they took him to the vet, and they went, this is weird. This dog should be dead, And so the dog was dying, and he came back to life. And this wound to the pancreas, the dog's pancreas, somehow just healed. And the physician said, this is nuts. And so she reminded me of that. I'd forgotten the story, and I was like, okay. So my intuition said, you can help this animal, and I wouldn't even, I can't even remember thinking you're nuts, or judging myself. I just did it. And remarkable things happened. And I've had a number of stories. I was at an ashram, another intuitive thing. I don't even know what possesses me besides intuition. That the woman who was the wife of a very famous Indian flautist who was there performing with Krishna Das. And Pam, my wife, is kind of more into that music I was, and she knew this guy. She had CDs of him and everything. So his wife was very sick, and she'd hurt her back, I think it was something like that. And so I said, well, he came by, and I said, I can like pray for her or put on hands or, do this stuff that I do occasionally. And he said, no, thank you very much. We have some of the best doctors from India here, but I really appreciate your concern. Thank you. And I said, okay. So anyway, he came back the next day. He said, I told my wife about you, and she asked that you would come and help her. Huh. Okay. So I went in, and I just did this thing, and she got better. Boom. And then when I was walking around the ashram for the next couple of days, the Indian doctors would see me, and they would bow to me, as I was a great healer, just that kind of thing. What if, doctors had the kind of intuitive, besides all the wonderful things that medicine is, Western medicine has brought into the world, but they could, touch and transmit and heal and love, and who knows, how that would work. And I don't know how to do it. I don't know if I could teach people how to do it, or if maybe we all have that gift or something. I'm not really sure. It's quite a mystery to me, but I could go on and tell you some other kind of crazy stories along those lines that were just intuitive in the moment, and things happened. Oh, and I worked with drug addicts for a long time. I wrote the book Integral Recovery, which is another really interesting story about Western medicine. I wrote this book because it emerged out of my years of struggling with trying to help people who are addicted. And I was given a talk, I think it was in Boulder, Colorado, and a young Swedish doctor came up to me. Young, he's probably your age. And he said, I'm a doctor. I said, well, that's great. Congratulations. He says, he says, and you're not a doctor. I said, no, I am not a doctor. And he says, and I had to learn about addiction from you. Yeah. He says, and that is not right. And I said, no, that is not right. It's really not. And in our country, in the United States, and it must be so in Sweden, or he wouldn't have said that, the doctors have been awful about one of our greatest healthcare problems for whatever reason. I don't really understand it. And not only that, but they've been part of the problem. In other words, they prescribe opioids, these very, very powerful addicting substances, like as if they were candy, and as if they weren't addicted, like they were aspirin, and gotten millions of people addicted to opioids. And finally they chase and they try to con the doctors and get prescriptions and everything, and they can't. So they go to the streets and they buy heroin because it's cheap, So what is the matter with you guys? Come on.
Mm.
And then they just, and I over and over again, I would ask doctor, well, why didn't you learn about addiction? And they're just like, well, we didn't. And, addicts are just a pain in the ass. They're always lying to you and yeah, it's true, but you're a doctor and they're really sick people. And we know now it's a disease. It's a disease of the brain. We know the organ. We know the defects. We know the symptoms. It qualifies as a disease in Western medicine. So, pull your heads out and your hearts out and let's get busy healing our people. But again, there's been that boundary there that they don't want to cross.
In many ways, your stories have, so one of the common threads in your stories is a direct connection. So whether it is, magic healing through laying hands or even simpler things like actually listening, actually connecting, or when the woman called for yourself, just to really make yourself available, not really knowing what is going to happen. We are entering in a terrain of uncertainty, right? When you met this woman in India, you didn't really know what is going to happen. You didn't have a protocol for how to treat her disease X. So there's a degree of innocence, there's a degree of not knowing, and a degree of making yourself available fully. And that's something that is not natural to many. It's certainly something that's not trained in medical school. From your experiences on either side, as a patient, as an addict, as a counselor, as somebody creating technologies to support this opening, what would it be that you would recommend young health professionals to give their attention to trust in this not knowing, to actually make themselves available and stay in this vulnerability rather than hiding in the facade of knowledge?
Yeah, well, that there's so much healing in human interaction. Okay, and if you're going to truly be a healer in a holistic, deep sense, and not just somebody who has a bunch of knowledge and can prescribe, or cut on things or, sew things up or do all those, stuff. And how do you do that? Well, it's not by dumb luck. I mean, some of us are more naturally attuned that way, but most of us, especially the people who are brainy enough to get through medical school and everything that precedes that, it ain't easy. So I've heard, and so that's why when we meet a doctor, we go, wow, that's somebody of substance. He got through medical school. It's like meeting a Navy SEAL or something. This person really went through something really hard that most of us couldn't do. But realizing that if you want to truly, be a healer, heal thyself, physician. So you have to have practices that deepen you in an intuitive sense, in a human sense, in a spiritual sense, in a compassionate sense, because you're dealing with death and you're dealing with disease and you're dealing with suffering. We don't go to see doctors when we're feeling good, right? There's something wrong. And if you don't develop the capacity to be empathetic and at the same time renew your own interior self, you get burnout, you get cynical, you become a mechanic instead of a deeply human, loving person. And and occasionally physicians, and I'm sure I since you're that way, actually do develop that loving, compassionate, intuitive, or spiritual, if you want to call it that, aspect of themselves. Man, your practice is just full because people just want to be around you, because you walk in and not only do you get a script, or or a guy, looking at his iPad and he doesn't have any time to look at you. It's like he just, okay, go out to the pharmacy and, wait around for 45 minutes and you'll get a prescription. People respond to that. And I live in a little isolated community. I'm in Louisiana right now for other reasons, but in southern Utah, and we have a little clinic there. It's for the whole county, and they're really lovely people. You know, it's like I go in and when I talk to my, and also we have nurse practitioners and physician's assistant, PAs. I don't know if you have the equivalent in Switzerland,
Yeah.
but often you want to talk to them and not talk to the doctors because they're much more human. So if you get a PA or a nurse, it's like, oh, good. Yeah, you can write scripts, you can do all this stuff, but they haven't got their humanity hammered out of them, you know. In med school, or maybe they just weren't there as long or something, but generally speaking, they seem to be more in touch with that. And I've just loved the care and the humanity that I've gotten at that clinic. And when I have to go to the doctors in some places it's more normal, it's awful. You know, it's, I mean, God bless them. I mean, you know, it's like, I'm not trying to put them down, but it's like, you have to sit out there for a long, long time and they just ignore you. And it's
And John, I can tell you, I've been there, and still, you know, every day this is something I know. I know these mechanics coming up, so I know those moments of cynicism. I know these moments of withdrawal, of emotional closure, of hiding behind knowledge, of kind of holding on to knowledge to have something to hold on in the midst of uncertainty while having to deal with, you know, real issues. And very often I don't have an answer, but somehow I'm trying to hold on to something at least. So taking away signs and symptoms may actually be not so bad to get started. So I can associate to this, to these feelings a lot. What would you, John, if you were my doc as a healthcare provider, what would you recommend to me if I find myself in these situations where I know, well, I'm out of balance, I'm somehow in protection mode, or I'm in arrogance mode, or I'm in cynicism mode, or I'm in complaining mode about, oh, this patient and these things happen. We're all human. So when I find myself out of balance and out of love, what would be a way to reset?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I write about in my book for treating addicts, and I think would be good for treating doctors, is it's called integral practice, or integrated practice. In other words, there's four basic things that you have to work on to set the foundation to be a fully actualized and even realized human being. First, you have to have a physical exercise. Okay, you have to train a lifetime athlete. And the medicine, I have a book back in my bedroom here. It's called, what is it called? It's a really important book here, but this written by a physician, but he goes through and just shows the data on every freaking thing you can imagine and how exercise has this tremendous effect, positive, beneficial effect. So physicians should be athletes. In other words, they should exude the kind of health and physicality that they would like their patients, you know, to have it. And I live in this isolated community, and there's farmers and, you know, ranchers and stuff, and they've had physical lives and everything. But, you know, by the time they get to my age, they have these big extended guts, you know, and their muscles, and they're horrible. They look like they're ready to die. And, you know, and they're still relatively young. So you have to embrace exercise. You have to model it. Take care of yourself, because one of the best things is dealing with stress, you know, dealing with, you know, dying people, sick people, hurting people all day. Man, you go to the gym or in the morning, however you do it, and just work out. Really important. Second of all is another practice is to pursue wisdom. In other words, read the great books, the great philosophers, the great teachers, talk to wise people, and build your kind of interior base of wisdom as well as knowledge in the scientific, you know, data sense. The third would be to have a practice, an interior practice, where you can work through your own issues. I mean, we all have issues, right? The messages about you got from your parents that, you know, maybe you weren't smart enough, you were this, that, the other, or the messages or these stories that we make up. A lot of it's unconscious about ourselves and about the world. Look at yourself in the mirror, confront those, get rid of them, and be the author of a more positive life from looking inside. Okay. And thirdly, or fourthly, I guess, and you know, that's dealing with the shadow stuff. A lot of these issues we don't even know are there. And by the way, all this shadow stuff and repressed PTSD or wounds that happened and we forgot and blah, blah, blah in the unconscious come out in the physical. They lead to depression, to cancer, to heart disease. I mean, they can have all kinds of somatic ramifications. So for you to be able to help your patients along those lines, you have to be done the work yourself. You have to walk the road, and it's a continual road. You don't get to the end. But coming from that place where you realize that it's not just about physical ailments or genetic or this or that and the other. There's an interior aspect of your emotional life that affects how you present and how you are in the world and your physical well-being as well. And then to have a practice, an interior meditative prayer, however you want to say that, practice where you shut up and go inside and still, your brilliant big old doctor mind, and just go into the depths of yourselves where we find a place of refuge. And eventually with time and practice, it also helps to be using these tools that we've developed to find the deepest and the wisest, the most beautiful part of yourself. And to have that place where you can go inside and renew your connection to life, renew your connection to, why did I become a doctor? Because I wanted to get really rich. Well, maybe in America, a lot of that was true. I don't think doctors, it's a natural, they don't make as much money as they did when I was growing up or when I was becoming an adult. But that was the idea. But if it was the motivation, which it should be, I want to help people. I want to heal people. That's my mission. I'm called to do this. So you have to go inside and renew that and understand that and grow with time into a wiser, better, more compassionate, humbler, maybe funnier, joyful person. And through this interior meditative, ongoing everyday practice. So you do the things to get you set up as a channel and tool, and you put that all together with all the beauty and the great accomplishments of Western medicine, and then you got something to show up for and get back to our human family and non-human family for that matter.
Wow, John, an hour of fireworks. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of this from your own impressions, speaking from your heart, sharing your personal stories, so much wisdom, so much concrete, like real, implementable advice for healthcare providers. I'd love to be your messenger here and kind of spread it to the heart-based medicine community, and hope that the heart-based medicine community will be able to read more on your website, iAwake Technologies, and follow up and find out more about the advice that you have and the fabulous tools that you have. I've been really enjoying them. I have worked a lot with your music, and it's been, it's part of my everyday practice. It's part of setting the tone. And indeed, sometimes, like today, when I had a rough day and I felt I'm kind of off the track, I listen to your music. I find time for myself to quiet and to shift and reset. And it's been a tremendous help. So thank you so much for all the work you do and for sharing this. It's wonderful to work with you and to meet you again.
And Jan, the next time that we do this, I want to be in your position. I want to ask the questions and listen to your story and hear what has brought you to this point in your life to focus on this incredible mission that you have of heart-based medicine, to bring the heart and the soul back into the field of Western medicine. It's a noble, very important thing, and it's so good. And I'm sure there's doctors all over the world who have come to the same realization, and they're waiting to connect with other doctors or have somebody saying what they've been thinking for a long time. So I just wish you all the success and support, and anything we can do at iAwake or what we're doing, I'm here for you, and would love to let people know about your work and your mission.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much. We'll bring everybody together and let the heart field emerge. Great to serve this field together with you. Thank you.
This has been a Heart-Based Medicine production. Thanks for listening.